Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today I'm here with Fran Maier. Thank you for joining us, Fran.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Hall.
Well, great. So what was your background before starting BabyQuip?
I've been doing internet startups since 1994. So BabyQuip is my fifth. My first was Match.com, perhaps your loved one through Match. I'm sure many of your listeners have, so that's always been great. And from there, I did Women.com and Bluelight.com during the crazy late 90s. And then I spent over 10 years at Trustee, the internet privacy company, which is now called TrustArc. And I changed it from a nonprofit to a for-profit in 2008 and raised venture capital to grow that because privacy obviously continues to be a big issue. And I left Trustee in 2012 and started BabyQuip in 2016. And in between that time, I was an Airbnb host. I also advised a lot of startup founders and served on some boards.
So what led you to start working in the sharing economy space?
Well, I moved to San Francisco in 2012, literally in Airbnb's backyard. So in 2012, I started renting rooms in my house and was happily surprised to find I was making a lot of money and there was a lot of demand. So I ended up buying a couple more properties in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, where I grew up. And it got me thinking about the way not only is travel changing, but the way work is changing and this whole gig and sharing economy generally. And so in 2016, I met a gal who had started a baby gear rental business in Santa Fe. She was doing about $30,000 annually. And as you well know, Santa Fe's not that big of a city. And I reflected on how many times I had hosted families at my home in San Francisco or in Santa Fe, and I didn't want to buy the baby gear. I didn't want to buy the crib and car seats and all of that, but I knew families really needed it. So we started the company in May of 2016. At that point, we only had 3 markets, and we're now in over 400 with over 500 providers.
So we have a lot of investors that listen to the show. And so what's your advice for investors who are starting to invest in the sharing economy space? What would you tell them about it?
The sharing economy is growing, and I think it's here to stay. And while the bigger names like Airbnb and Uber are dominating, there's a lot of categories where people have equipment, gear, things that they don't use. And it makes sense in a lot of ways to think about how to monetize that. So I wouldn't, from an investor standpoint, just get stuck on what Airbnb and Uber are doing, but obviously massive businesses. And I would say it's part of the lore for both those companies and others that at the beginning, how big could this get? There were some real questions in investor minds. Would people really do this? In fact, people asked me that about Match.com way back in the 90s. Would people really do this? And we know that Match now, or online dating in general, is the primary way people meet and date now. And the old way is called dating in the wild. So I think it's easy to underestimate the impact and the growth that this sector can really, really have.
Well, let's talk about the sharing economy in general that's now launched and starting to grow. And how do you see it evolving in the next 2 to 3 years as to few people are dominating it now, but it appears to be going out to a lot of other sectors as well. But where do you see it going?
Yeah, well, I've seen some stats that suggest that it should go from something like 100 billion now to well over 300 billion in less than 10 years. So that's at least triple growth. And again, I don't think we've seen it play through in all the different areas that it could be. I mean, just since I've been doing BabyQuip, I've seen companies in construction, in workspaces, in obviously renting your own car, not just renting Ubers. There's a lot of categories that really lend themselves to this.
So as an investor trying to invest in a sharing economy space, what are the different ways they can invest in it? Or what, better question is, how do you invest in a sharing economy space? What do you look for in a company that's doing that?
Well, so basically, most of these companies are two-sided or multi-sided marketplaces. And what you want to see is whether or not the company, and it depends on its stage, has really solved the chicken and the egg problem. Are they getting both sides of the marketplace to the platform to engage in whatever commerce or sharing? I think that's really critical. The second thing that you need to start to think about is the provider of the rental gear, in our case, our people are mostly moms, they own their own gear, and they are really investing in the business. Are they getting a good return on their equipment or asset or time? In the case of BabyQuip, our providers on average are bringing home over $500 a month. This is second only to Airbnb in the sharing economy. So we feel really good about that. Much more than, I have to say, they tell us that's much more gratifying than driving a car to rent gear to a traveling family. And then there's a bunch of different stats, and I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of investors, and the things that they're looking at are liquidity. In other words, is there enough demand for the supply, or is there enough supply for the demand? And there's a number of different ways of measuring that. It can be hard. And I always feel that is the company on its way to being the market leader. It does make a difference. We've seen again and again in internet-based companies that the market tends to go to one and maybe two. And honestly, the situation between Uber and Lyft is not that great because they are undercutting each other's prices. So you really want to go with the dominant provider or the dominant brand. And I'm very happy to say that at this point, BabyQuip is the national brand.
Sounds great. So in the sharing economy space, there's many challenges. There's regulatory, there's technical, and there's market. In the rental space that you're in, what do you consider to be the main challenge that companies have to overcome?
Yeah, for us, this is a category that typically has not been a rental category. So we are really building a new category. I'd say 75% of families don't know that they can rent the gear. Now, the good news is if they don't know something, they often go to Google and say, can I rent gear in San Francisco? Baby gear in San Francisco. Sometimes they say baby. Okay.
You can't rent a baby.
Yeah. And Google's smart enough to say, you probably mean baby gear or baby equipment. So that's good. It is kind of funny. But I think awareness of the service is really, really critical. For us, there are a lot of rental platforms, Garage, Fat Llama, where you can rent landscaping gear, things that are in your garage. But I think with baby gear, parents are really looking for some assurances that things are very clean and safe. And that's really been the challenge that I think we've overcome the challenge, but getting that across that you want to rent with us because we're going to you want to rent with us because we're going to put a lot of attention to safety and cleanliness as well as hospitality. So that's really important. Regulatory, I'm letting the big boys fight the battle on whether or not our independent providers should be considered employees. That being said, our providers are making pretty good money. So I think we're going to be able to skirt that for a bit. Regulatory, technical, and what was the other one, Hull?
There's also the marketplace where sometimes these markets are highly fragmented and you can hard to be at scale. Sometimes the channels aren't fully developed and it can take a while to get the word out. And it sounds like there's just native demand here that people are actually typing it into Google for searching. So they're looking for you,
right,
which is a great place to be. But how do you see the marketplace shaping up for it?
Yeah, I think that we are really at BabyQuip addressing a large and underserved market. And when you can find that, that's the best thing because it's a win-win for everybody. We really focus on recruiting our supply and making sure that our suppliers, who we call providers, are really interested in delivering a high-quality, above and beyond experience for the families who rent from us. And when we have those providers, and I'm happy to say most of them are stay-at-home moms in their 20s and 30s. Most of them have worked before and have college degrees. They are really intent on building a business, and that's the magic. Because again, I think that there's demand everywhere, but unlocking it means that not only do we as a company have to do some advertising, AdWords, and things like that, but we need to enable our providers on the ground to do the hyper-local marketing that we can't do. So they can set up their Google My Business, they can get on Yelp, Nextdoor, they can reach out to grandparents who are a big part of our market. And turning that on is kind of the second level. It's recruiting the right provider and then really enabling and giving them the tools that they can build their business.
Well, it sounds great. Well, it sounds like it's different from the ride-hailing apps where there is no, everyone just gets a gig and it's over when it's over. And here the providers are actually building their own sub-business that they can grow and own and make bigger and better. So it sounds like it's quite a bit of a difference in model there.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, we have this debate, are we Uber or Airbnb? And the difference is with Airbnb, you do pick your house, right? On Uber, you don't really pick your car, and you don't need to. But we think with the baby gear, you want to pick the provider. You want to know that somebody's accountable to delivering all the different gear.
I see. Okay. So it's just a little bit different structure in that case, but
Yeah.
it sounds like there's a little bit more ownership in it as well, that people have some pride in their equipment or their work, or they're putting a certain type of solution together to go after a certain type of customer. So it's a little bit more custom. When you get into most Ubers, it's just a car going from here to there, and it doesn't matter how you get there in most cases.
Yeah, I would say our providers are fanatical. Just today, we had one of our regular webinars, and they participate. They participate in our private closed community. They share ideas. They collaborate. And I really think it's a secret sauce.
Oh, great, great. Well, so maybe you can describe BabyQuip a little bit more from start to finish, how it works.
Sure. So BabyQuip rents baby gear, strollers, car seats, cribs, high chairs, toys, and probably 40 other items right now, primarily to traveling families. And we do this by connecting the families to independent providers who we call quality providers or providers. These are mostly, as I mentioned, stay-at-home moms who are looking to have a very rewarding side hustle. So they're looking to have a rewarding side hustle. And the parent can come on to babyquip.com, put in their destination, their travel dates, and see who in their market is maybe closest or has the gear that they want, connect with that provider and select the gear, check out, indicate when they're coming, where they're coming, a 2-hour window for delivery, and our providers get the order and they fulfill it. So you don't have to wait for 24 hours to get a confirmation. The provider will probably reach out to you and make sure you ordered everything that you wanted to, and maybe fine-tune before you arrive the exact delivery time. And we'll reach out to you before the delivery to identify the delivery window, whether or not it's 1 hour or 2 hours, and fine-tune any of the details. We just got through Memorial Day. We had a lot of orders out, and we had no issues. Everybody got the gear that they needed by the time that they needed it. Then at the end, our providers come in, pick it up. Oftentimes they set up, by the way, pick it up, and then they refresh each piece of gear, make sure it's clean, safe, and rent it out again next time.
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate you going through that. In the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, one of the things that we've really tapped into is the power of community. And it really does make a difference both to parents and to providers on our network, but I'll talk mostly about providers, that they have a community to tap into. They share ideas. They share deals. They might see a good deal for a piece of equipment, and they'll put it on our private Facebook page. They'll complain at times. They'll take pictures of gear that came back dirty. They'll help somebody else with a potential difficult customer. And that power has really made a big difference. I think the second thing that's really critical is trust. And I learned this from the Match.com days. What can you do to improve trust on the network or the platform? What we've done is many things, but critical to that has been insurance. So we know that, God forbid, something happened, and nothing has happened heretofore, knock on wood, that a child or property got damaged, that there's insurance to cover that. Most of our providers, they own their own homes. They don't really want to have that liability. So it was really critical for me early on to secure liability insurance for our providers and our families. What that also does is our providers don't take orders off the platform because they wouldn't be insured.
Good point. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate you running that down for us. And how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Fran at babyquip.com, BABYQUIP, or they can find me under Fran Maier, MAIER, on LinkedIn, or at Fran Maier on Twitter.
Well, great. We'll put that in the show notes and let people know where you're at. And we hope to have you back for a follow-up soon. Appreciate your taking time today.
Thank you, Hall. Appreciate it too.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.